Ken Whiting with Paddle TV with another in-depth, unbiased gear review. Well, actually, let's talk about the unbiased part. Someone recently left a comment saying that, hey, we all have our biases, and so it's not really fair to call this thing an unbiased review, and that's a good point. What I really mean is that sponsorship dollars do not affect my review. I tell you straight up the truth about what I think of each and every kayak that I review. That being said, I go into reviews with my own personal biases. I try not to. I try to approach gear reviews from the standpoint of, a clean slate, no personal bias, but that's impossible. With that said, I am really excited to test this boat, the Scupper 14 by Swell Watercraft. Now, why am I excited to test this kayak? Well, I look at it and I say, that's my style of kayak. And why? Well, it's not because it's a sit-on-top kayak, but it's because it's a very different type of sit-on-top kayak. When you hear the term sit-on-top kayak, you usually think of a big, wide, heavy, low-performing kayak that's designed for comfort, stability, just confidence on the water that you're not going to flip. Now, what Swell Watercraft did is they said, you know what, a sit-on-top kayak doesn't need to be that. A sit-on-top kayak can be high-performing, and it can have the benefits of sit-on-top kayaks and the benefits of sit-inside kayaks. And so that's what they've tried to do. Now it's my job to find out, did they do it? Is it worth the money? And who exactly is this kayak for? And so let's get right into it. The Swell Watercraft Scupper 14 has a retail price of $1,249 US. It's 14 feet 1 inch long. It's 25.5 inches wide. It weighs 64 pounds or 29 kilos, and it has a capacity of 390 pounds. The Scupper 14 has a padded adjustable seat, a paddle holder, 4 grab handles, 2 at the ends, 2 on the side, a large tank well in the back with a recess for a scuba tank, scupper valves, Yak Attack Mighty Mount gear tracks both in the stern and the bow for attaching accessories, a bottle holder, an oval day hatch, foot pegs, and a large bow hatch. So what makes the Scupper 14 so different from other sit-on-top kayaks on the market? Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's to get it on the water. And so that's what I'm going to do. Well, it's been a beautiful day to test the Scupper 14. The water's about 45 degrees, but the air's around 90 degrees. It's one of those weird late spring, super hot days. But the nice thing is the water was nice and high, or it is nice and high right now, and so there's lots of current. So I could test this thing in a variety of conditions, not just flat water. And this is what I can tell you. But before I do tell you that, quick note, if you haven't heard me talk about this already, the ACA recently came out with an online paddling safety course. It's a free online course you do at your own convenience. It's a relatively small investment of time that can make a world of difference in your life, because the reality of paddle sports is it's generally a very safe activity, but you're on the water, and when things go wrong, things can go very wrong, and it's usually a little bit of information, a little bit of safety knowledge that can mean the difference between a happy outcome and a disastrous outcome. So go to, well, there's going to be a link in the description box down below. Check out the ACA online paddling safety course and do it. All right, so let's talk about the Scupper 14, starting, as I always do, with portability. Now, it's a 14-foot kayak, and I've always said that the longer a boat gets, the less portable it is, and that's true with whatever type of kayak it is, unless of course it's an inflatable or some type of folding, a portable kayak. 14 feet is a lot of boat to put on your vehicle, to carry around. I typically say a 14-foot kayak is a two-person job. Yes, you can carry this thing around as a single person, but it does have a replaceable skid pad on the stern, so you can drag it. I wouldn't recommend doing that for very long, not on crazy hard surfaces, but you can drag it. You can carry it suitcase style. It does have handles on the side, although what I found out very quickly when I tried to carry this thing on the side is that your fingers get pinched. They're not great side handles. This really is an end carrying boat. Otherwise though, this is a 14-foot sit on top kayak and it's only 64 pounds. Now, 64 pounds isn't nothing, that's for sure. But a 14-foot sit-on-top kayak at 64 pounds is pretty awesome. And it's because of how they built this thing. It uses a lightweight but still very strong rotomolded technology. It's actually polyethylene outer layer, and then they've got this foam layer on the inside of this boat to give it stiffness and to reduce the overall weight of this thing. And I'm impressed. 64 pounds for a 14-foot sit-on-top kayak, that is not what I was expecting. These days, man, it's not uncommon to have a 100-pound or more sit-on-top kayak. So high points for portability, despite the fact that, yeah, it's a 14-foot kayak. All right, now let's get right on to the performance on the water, starting with stability. Is it a stable kayak? Well, yes and no. It's not designed primarily for stability. That was one of the big differences between this sit-on-top kayak and most sit-on-top kayaks. It's only 25.5 inches wide. It's as stable as a 25.5-inch kayak should be. Now, primary stability, which is the stability when you're just sitting here, it's totally adequate, totally fine. You don't feel like you're on a dock. It's not that stable by any means, but it's stable enough. I don't feel wobbly. Secondary stability on edge, same thing. It doesn't have like a bomber secondary stability. It doesn't want to just lock in on that secondary edge, but it's also very easy to edge. It's totally adequate. So stability overall for a 25-inch kayak, very comparable to 25-inch touring kayaks. Now, performance, how does it compare performance-wise to, a 25-inch touring kayak? Well, it does. It compares to a 25-inch touring kayak. It performs great. It's fast. It tracks really well. It turns moderately well as you would expect a 14-foot touring kayak to turn. So, really solid performance. I love the big bow on this thing and the rounded bow too. So water that breaks on the bow just kind of sheds right off. The other nice thing about that is it provides more storage room, which I'll talk about when we get into features. But this boat it cuts through the water beautifully. It accelerates very nicely. It's a nice performing boat. And the fact that you're sitting lower in it, my feet are lower. I mean, you can just tell it paddles like a sit inside touring kayak, not like a sit on top kayak. One thing that is noticeable on this boat is, I'll just pull this paddle out of the way. On the front up here, they've really sloped, they've cut away some of the plastic here. And what that allows you to do is allows your stroke to be in closer to the boat. That's another great feature. I mean, this boat is clearly designed for performance. Now, something else I want to mention about performance is this is such a great performing boat, but it's actually, I feel like I'm being held back a bit. And the reason I'm being held back is because of the outfitting. It doesn't have any type of hip pads, and it doesn't have any type of thigh braces. Now, a comparable touring kayak will have hip pads and thigh hooks. This one, if this thing had thigh straps, removable thigh straps and removable hip pads, all of a sudden my butt wouldn't be moving side to side. I'd have way more control over the edging of this kayak. That would be a wonderful upgrade to see. Now, let's talk comfort. A topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Because for me, if a boat isn't comfortable, well, it's a deal breaker. So is this boat comfortable? Yes, it's comfortable. Is it the most comfortable boat on the market? No, it's not the most comfortable boat in the market, but it's a very comfortable boat. Now, having your heels, your feet low. Now, my feet are under the water line of this kayak. Now, that is not normal for a kayak of this nature. Sit-on-top kayaks, typically everything, your whole body is above the water line. But in this boat, they've cut the cockpit down super low. What that does is it puts your heels below your butt. And that's just a comfortable position. And actually, I should elaborate on that, because that's one of the big features of this kayak, is that your feet are below the water line of the kayak. And so that lowers your center of gravity dramatically for a sit-on-top kayak. Now, and when you think of a sit-on-top kayak, you think you're sitting on top of the kayak. But with this kayak, it's more like a sit-inside kayak, because you're nice and low and in it, except you're not covered. You have that total freedom to move around. So it's almost a hybrid between a sit-on-top and a sit-inside kayaks that benefits from the low center of gravity, that stability that you get from sitting low like you do in a sit-inside kayak. That's assuming it doesn't have an elevated seat. And the benefits of a sit-on-top kayak, which are this thing can't swamp. I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let's keep going with the comfort side. Now, it's comfortable because you're low foot position. The seat is nicely padded. It's a nice, very padded seat. Is it exceptionally comfortable? No. No, my butt is starting to get a little bit sore. It's not like, I'm a sucker for framed seats with suspension, like a mesh suspension seat, because it conforms to any butt. This one, they've got to create a seat pan that fits every butt. They've done a great job working within those limitations. The high back seat on this thing is nice. Side note, I should be wearing a high back seat life jacket, something that doesn't have foam right here, because that is kind of getting in the way right there. That's on me. That's not the seat's fault. That's me. I should have known better. Otherwise, comfort, I have the foot pegs at the very end, and it's perfectly sized for me. That means anyone bigger with longer legs than me isn't going to fit, is not going to be comfortable in this kayak. It's going to make put their knees up too high, and that's just really uncomfortable. I am 6'2", 195 pounds, not the weight has an issue here. And I've got, I don't know, roughly a 34-inch inseam. I'm not even sure. I really do need to measure it sometime. But I'm long in the leg. So I'm 6'2" and long in the leg, but I am as tall as you can be in this kayak. Something to note. Now, features. Lots of features in this boat to talk about. Let's start with the scuppers, my favorite part of this thing. The scuppers in this thing, because the floor of this thing is underneath the water line, you can't have typical scupper holes. Scupper holes are holes in sit-on-top kayaks that go right through the boat, and when water comes in, the water drains out. But that only works if the top of that hole is above the water line. Water wants to get out. In this case, that hole is below the water line. So if you have that scupper open, the water's actually just going to rush in. That doesn't work. So what they came up with was a scupper valve. It's like a one-way valve basically for the scupper. You have this valve in there, and it's plugged when it's actually up, but then you push it down, and now there's holes on the bottom of the scupper plug that let the water from the cockpit out of the kayak. But it only works when you're moving, when you're traveling at speed, and that allows the water to drain out of your boat. And I tested it, and it works. Shows how the scuppers drain the water. Let's see if I can drain the last little bit. It doesn't drain as fast as a traditional sit-on-top kayak with a bunch of scupper plugs, no, but it drained pretty darn well. It's more not for ongoing relief of water that's in your boat, but it's like, whoop, I get a wave breaking over top. I'm swamped. Well, let's pop these things out, and let's over the next 30 strokes, get that water out of the boat. And it does it. It totally does it. I'm very impressed.
That works really well.
Now, otherwise, this boat, storage-wise, the features, the large bow hatch, that's awesome. There's so much room up there. I'm not used to that in a sit-on-top kayak. And not only is there a lot of room up there, but there's a big hatch cover, a big opening to access it. So you don't have this little, that drives me nuts when you have a lot of space in the kayak that you want to use for kayak camping, but you have this little opening to get into it, and it's not practical whatsoever. Not these guys. They created this massive bow hatch with that accesses. You can load that thing, no problem kayak camping with that, because you also have a ton of space in the rear tank well to load dry bags on top and strap them down, and there's bungees to strap it down. No, I love the storage of this. This opens the world of kayak camping to sit-on-top paddlers, which you can do it in other sit-on-top boats, but definitely not as comfortably as you can in this thing. Now, this day hatch right in between the legs, this space here, unless you're in a kayak that is designed to stand up, and so you're going to be standing here, this is dead space for the most part. And this day hatch is great. It's easy access right here, and it's locking. I'm sure it's not, I wouldn't consider it waterproof, but water resistant for sure. You can put anything you need easy access to, sunscreen, snacks, phone, that kind of stuff. It's not big enough for a water bottle. That's what they have here, a water bottle holder up front. But I really like this feature. The fact that this boat has gear tracks, it's great. One in the front, one behind. That one in the front is great for mounting an action camera. The one behind is great for mounting camera poles, for rod holders, although it does come with a couple of integrated rod holders with the kayak. You know, this thing it's a feature-rich sit-on-top kayak. It may not have all the features that a high-end fishing kayak, specific kayak has, but it's got a lot. Now let's talk value. $1,249 US. Well, that's a chunk of change. It's not a cheap kayak, but let's just get right to it. For a kayak that's as feature-rich as this kayak is, and it performs as well as this kayak does, I think $1,249 is exceptional value. I expect, to be honest, to pay more for this kayak. So if they can hold the price at that point, that is wonderful. They do have versions come with a rudder and some advanced, slight improvements, not improvements, but just accessories that even take it to the next level, and you pay more for that. But this base model at $1,249, whammo, great price. But who's it for? Well, this kayak, it can be for almost anyone. It could be for a beginner paddler. It's stable enough for a beginner paddler to hop in this thing, and as long as they're a confident beginner and are willing to give up that sense of rock solid stability, they want a boat that's going to trade stability for performance. If you're a beginner with that mindset, then yeah, this is totally a reasonable beginner boat. And on the expert side, very much, I have a lot of fun paddling this boat. It's really it can accommodate a wide range of skills. It can handle rivers, lakes, ocean. It can really do it all because it's self-bailing. If it swamps, you can drain the water and you're fine. If you're going to take it into open water, further from shore than you can comfortably swim, you definitely need to practice your re-entry technique. Learn how to get back on this boat once you flipped, because it's narrow enough you can flip. And even though this thing self-bails, when you load this thing, when a wave gets over top and it's full, it does not perform nearly as well. There's a lot more weight in this kayak. You could definitely flip. So if you're going to take it into rougher conditions or further from shore than you can very comfortably swim, you need to have practiced in controlled conditions and be confident with your ability to get back into this kayak from the water. If you can't do that, then you need to stay close to shore, and you need to stay in very smooth and controlled flat water environments. Well, there you have it. My long-winded breakdown review of the Scupper 14 by Swell Watercraft. You know, great job, Swell. I really like the boat you've put together here, and I'm looking forward to putting this to the test on some more paddling adventures. I hope you guys have enjoyed this review, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Paddle TV if you haven't already, and stay tuned because we got tons more gear reviews, paddling tips, and paddling adventures coming your way.